He raised money by convincing investors he was going to elevate the world's consciousness. He was selling desk space. The valuation hit $47 billion before a single share ever traded. Then it lost almost all of it in a matter of weeks. This is Adam Neumann, and the irony is simple. The man who promised to change how humanity works couldn't survive one filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. New York City, 2008. Adam Neumann had already tried and failed at a baby clothing line called Crawlers, shoes with knee pads built into the knees for babies who crawl. It didn't work. Nobody wanted it. But Neumann didn't slow down. He leaned in, because failure to him wasn't a signal to quit. It was proof he simply hadn't found the big enough idea yet. He was subletting a floor of a building in Brooklyn, splitting the space with other struggling entrepreneurs, and he watched something happen that most landlords would have missed entirely. People wanted more than a desk. They wanted a room that felt alive, a community that felt like belonging, a mission that felt bigger than rent. "You're not just leasing square footage," he told a friend over cheap coffee. "You're selling a feeling." The friend laughed. Neumann didn't. A steady job at a shipping company had once been the plan. Safe, predictable, forgettable. Neumann had done the safe thing before, and it had made him nothing. He was done being sensible. He wanted the whole floor. He wanted the whole building. He wanted, eventually, the world to rent its offices from him. And somewhere in that hunger, the man who would inflate the largest private valuation in American history to date started exactly the way most delusions start, quietly and completely unnoticed. By 2011, WeWork was already something New York couldn't ignore. Neumann had found his foil early. Miguel McKelvey, an architect with a communal upbringing on an Oregon commune, who gave the company its aesthetic soul while Neumann supplied the appetite. Together, they didn't just rent office space. They built a machine, sign a long-term lease at a low rate, chop it into slick, Instagrammable micro-offices, rent it back out short-term at a premium, and call the markup community. The culture became the product. Kombucha on tap, beer at 4 p.m., yoga in the hallway. Neumann didn't sell leases. He sold belonging. He sold ambition. He sold the idea that your job and your identity could finally be the same thing. And thousands of startups, freelancers, and small teams bought it. The numbers back the myth, at least on paper. By 2017, WeWork operated in over 20 countries. It had raised more than $10 billion from SoftBank alone. Its valuation crossed $20 billion. Bigger than most airlines, bigger than most banks, for a company that was, underneath the mission statements, a real estate arbitrage play wearing a hoodie. "We're not a real estate company," Neumann told a room of investors. "We're a state of consciousness." Nobody in the room asked him to explain what that meant. They just kept writing checks. He barefoot walked across stages. He talked about living forever, about WeWork one day educating children in We Grow schools, about elevating the world's consciousness one desk at a time. SoftBank's Masayoshi Son reportedly told him to be more ridiculous, to think bigger, spend faster, dominate harder. So Neumann did exactly that. By 2019, the valuation had climbed to $47 billion. Well, work wasn't profitable. It had never been profitable. But profitability in this story felt like a rule for smaller people. And Neumann was already planning the biggest move of his career, taking the company public and opening the books for the entire world to read. By August of 2019, The myth was about to meet its pursuer. And its pursuer wasn't a rival company. It was a public filing. WeWork submitted its S-1 to go public, the document every company must open to the world before selling shares on the stock market. And for the first time, Wall Street analysts, journalists, and ordinary investors could actually see the machine up close instead of hearing Neumann describe it from a stage. What they found wasn't a state of consciousness. It was billions of dollars in losses. It was Neumann personally trademarking the word "we" and then selling it back to his own company for close to $6 million. It was Neumann's wife, Rebekah, holding outsized influence over succession decisions with no formal governance to justify it. It was a founder who had cashed out hundreds of millions of dollars in stock and loans, while the company bled money every single quarter. The press didn't need to editorialize. The filing did the work for them. Internally, the unraveling matched the external threat beat for beat. Neumann's habits, the private jet stocked for parties, the reported enthusiasm for tequila shots before board meetings, the erratic hiring and firing of executives, stopped reading as visionary eccentricity and started reading as recklessness. The same behavior, the same man, but the frame around him had changed completely. Pull the roadshow, an advisor reportedly told him, as investor after investor balked at the valuation. "They don't understand what we're building," Neumann said. They understood exactly what he was building. That was the problem. Within weeks, the $47 billion number was being left out of the room. SoftBank, the company's largest backer, began calculating what it would cost to save its own investment from Neumann himself. Then came the point of no return. The board moved to strip Neumann of his voting control, and days later, forced him out as chief executive entirely. The man who had built WeWork in his own image was no longer allowed to run it. The man who wanted to elevate the world's consciousness left with an exit package worth close to $1.7 billion, while the company he built teetered toward collapse. WeWork's planned IPO was pulled entirely. The $47 billion valuation collapsed to a fraction of that within months. Thousands of employees were laid off. The company that once promised community and belonging spent the next several years fighting simply to survive, eventually filing for bankruptcy in November of 2023. And yet Neumann himself never really lost. He walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars in cash and stock sales, a reputation dented but not destroyed, and within a few years, a new venture, backed once again by major investors, betting on him all over again. The employees who'd believed in the mission lost their jobs. The early investors who bought in near the peak lost most of their capital. The landlords in cities that had bet on WeWork's long-term leases were left holding contracts built on a company that could no longer pay them. Neumann once stood on a stage and told a room full of believers that he wasn't selling real estate. He was right. He was selling belief, and belief, it turns out, doesn't need to be true to be worth $47 billion. It just needs someone willing to buy it. If you made it this far, you're not the type who scrolls past the good stuff. That puts you in a small group. And this channel is built for exactly that group. Subscribe now before you forget. It takes 2 seconds, and it means you never miss the next one.